Smith's biological daughter was brought back to the Smiths' house, and my adoptive parents called me a fraud and tried to kick me out. My older brother gave me a cold look and told me to get lost. Even my first love, my fiancé, watched as I got drenched in wine by the biological daughter and demanded I apologize to her. He said, "I've always loved Jenny. You, a fraud that's taken her place, just make me sick." But what they didn't know is that I'm kind of a lucky charm. Winning 200 million in the lottery was just the start. After a trip for filming, I casually bought a lottery ticket and won 200 million. I was thrilled and rushed home to share my joy, only to find out I was just a mistake, swapped by the nanny, not the real princess. Her name is Jenny. She's strikingly pretty and was sitting gracefully on the sofa, enjoying the compliments from all the Smith family relatives. Even my strict adoptive parents were all smiles, charmed by her. Oh no, they said they were no longer my parents. Trembling, I asked, "Then where are my real parents?" Lisa sneered, "You mean those country folks?" Jenny jumped in, "Mom, don't say that. Sue's biological parents might be poor recyclers, but they managed to raise 3 kids. I'm sure once Sue goes back, she'll do just fine." She looked over to my left. That's when I noticed 2 middle-aged folks with graying hair, sitting nervously in the corner on a small stool, fiddling anxiously with their dirt-stained pants. They couldn't even look at me. Chase nudged me. "Sue, what are you waiting for? Those are your real parents. Go recognize them." Still reeling from the shock, I was pushed to the floor. Laughter erupted around me. The couple referred to as my biological parents rushed over. The woman wiped her hands on her shirt before helping me up. "Sue, are you okay?" I didn't say a word. Tom waved over 2 security guards. "Sue, since you're not the Smith heiress and you found your real parents, get out of the Smith house now." Gazes, sharp as needles, pierced me from all directions. A sparrow trying to be a phoenix. A fraud is a fraud. Better run back to the countryside and go back to picking trash. Really thought being the Smith princess for 23 years meant you'd be one forever. Those I once saw as family now stood there, mocking me with cold disdain. I'd come to share the joy of winning the lottery with them, only to be kicked out. Like a soulless zombie, I stood there at a loss. My biological mom sighed and gently urged me out. "Sue, let's go home." Before leaving, Jenny, all smiles, handed me an invitation. "Sue, there's a charity banquet this afternoon. You were once part of the Smith family, so come join the fun." Despite her gentle looks, Jenny's words often carried hidden barbs, much like Lisa's. I coldly watched her extend the invitation towards me. Chase snorted from the side. "Jenny, you're being too generous. Sue's family is poor. Attending a banquet, she probably can't even afford a dress." With each word, my biological parents hung their heads lower. I clenched my fist, snatched the invitation, and forced a smile. "Thank you. I'll be there." I turned to leave, laughter echoing behind me. On the way home, my mom kept stammering about our situation. I had 2 twin sisters in high school, bright and well-behaved, but I stayed quiet, head down. My dad glanced at me, then nudged my mom with his calloused hand. I looked up in the direction he pointed. It was at a high-end, well-known cafe, packed with stylish young women, buzzing with the latest big-name collaboration. Mom peered at the price board, hesitated, and finally pulled out a bag full of cash, all wrinkled 1s and 5s. Ignoring the judging stares from passers-by, she counted out 338 yuan for my dad, get 1 for Sue. 338 was the price of their signature, most expensive drink. No need. I tried to stop him but was too late. Dad emerged, sweaty, with a takeout coffee and a dinosaur plushie. "Sue, young folks like you probably love this. It even came with this. Try it and see if you like it." Tears pricked my eyes as I took the toy and coffee, nodding, "I like it." About an hour later, I arrived at my new home, an old but tidy place in the village. My sisters had dinner ready and stood shyly in the doorway waiting. After lunch, Dad did the dishes while Mom prepared to take my sisters to school. But then someone came by with a delivery. Mom hesitated, reaching for her coin purse, but I stopped her hand. "I'll take Zoe and Jane to school." I called a rideshare, dropped my sisters off, and slipped them each 200 yuan. "If I'm late tonight, get a ride home and buy something nice for them." "Thanks, sis." I left school and had the driver take me to the lottery building. After cashing in a jackpot of 200 million, I spent 20 million on a villa downtown and bought a Porsche. Finally, I drove the Porsche to the mall to pick out a high-end dress. After getting my makeup done, I headed straight to the charity gala. This charity event was led by the Vivian Group, and prominent families like the Smiths and the Johns were all involved. So, most attendees were old friends of mine. I roamed around with a glass of orange juice as usual, Jenny spotted me, and her smile froze instantly. Sue, I thought you wouldn't show up, she suddenly called out to me. Squeezing through the crowd with a forced smile, she asked, Sue, how's the new place? Did your mom and dad collect a lot of junk today? Her words sparked laughter in the crowd. Who's that girl talking to Sue? Never seen her before. You don't know. The buzz today is that Sue isn't the real Smith daughter. She's the daughter of some junk collectors. The real Smith princess is Jenny, who was switched at birth by the nanny. Junk collectors, that's got to be filthy. Gross just thinking about it. How is Sue even here if her family is so broke? That dress she's wearing doesn't look like something a junk collector's daughter could afford. Jenny feigned innocence, continuing, Sue, where'd you rent that dress from? Was it expensive? Need me to lend you some money? The dress, I muttered, playing with my fingers nonchalantly. Not too pricey, just a couple million. Thought I'd have some fun. Jenny smirked, not believing a word. No surprise since in her eyes, without the Smith family status, I couldn't possibly afford it. People around started whispering, are her real parents junk collectors? How could she afford a dress like that? I chuckled. You should ask Jenny about the money. She's lived with them for over 20 years after all. Maybe my words hit a sore spot, stirring unpleasant memories for Jenny. Her eyes glinted with malice as she glared at me. Feigning sympathy, she said, Sue, if your family can't afford it, just admit it. Don't resort to improper means. Your parents would be heartbroken. She didn't specify what she meant by improper means. But in this crowd, things didn't need to be spelled out to be understood. People's gazes turned even more contemptuous. Only a dirty mind sees everything as dirty. I glanced at Jenny's clenched fists and lazily said, oh, right. I almost forgot to tell you all. I won 200 million in the lottery. The crowd erupted. Jenny's face couldn't hold its composure any longer. Her expression fell. Congratulations, Sue, she said through gritted teeth. I shrugged, unbothered, and poured myself more orange juice. Just then, Jenny's voice rang out, John, you're finally here. My hand shook, spilling orange juice from the glass. John was my ex-fiancé, and my first love. We'd always been close. Before I left for college abroad, he gave me a cherry blossom brooch, promising he'd wait for me. 6 months ago, he took over William Group as CEO. I returned after graduating, and entered the entertainment industry, luckily landing my first script. Everyone envied me for having a perfect fiancé, handsome, wealthy, and deeply affectionate. Until 2 weeks ago, when he suddenly broke up with me and pulled his funding from my project. When I got the breakup news, I'd just finished shooting a scene. I broke down crying that night. Thank goodness my director was understanding and didn't hold John's actions against me, so I could finish filming. During this breakup, I maintained my pride, refusing to seek him out. Yet, here I was, running into him again. He walked in hand with Jenny, doting on her. Jenny, why are you here so early? Jenny glanced at me and giggled. I didn't want you waiting too long, couldn't bear it. The boy who promised to wait for me now made the same promise to someone else. I closed my eyes, a suffocating feeling making me want to bolt. But Jenny didn't intend to let me go. She and John walked over to toast me, but just as they were about half a meter away, Jenny tripped. Her wine spilled in my direction. Oh, a sharp cry sounded, but it wasn't mine. Just then, a girl in an opulent dress walked past me, and got soaked by the icy wine. That's the favorite daughter of the Green family, and Jenny's the Smith princess. This gonna be interesting. Funny, I saw Jenny aiming for Sue, yet hit Vivian instead. What happened? Everyone around was laughing with a bit of schadenfreude. Jenny hadn't expected to throw it at the wrong person. Just a moment ago, she was all high and mighty. Now, that attitude vanished in a flash. She blushed and rushed over to apologize. I picked up a box of tissues and handed it to Vivian. Vivian took the box from me and frowned at Jenny. You're the girl the Smith family brought back from the countryside, right? Just got back, and they didn't teach you any manners. I get it, but now that you're here, you should learn from Sue about how to be a real princess. Don't end up being a wild chicken with no manners. Jenny's face was alternating between red and white. Her lips were trembling, and tears were starting to show at the corners of her eyes. Sorry, Vivian, I'll pay for your dress. Good. Remember to have the Smiths transfer 5 million into my account. Vivian handed the tissue box back to me, smiled, and said, thanks today, Sue. I'll take you out for dinner sometime. With that, she strode away. Sis, I didn't mean to mess up Vivian's dress. You just hit the lottery, and you're not short of money. Can't you help me pay Vivian back? Jenny came over with a pitiful face, pulling on my hand. Firm no. I quickly stepped back, avoiding her grasp. Jenny's hand missed, and her face showed some embarrassment and annoyance. She turned around, pulling John over, and said loudly, John, look at her. I'm just borrowing a little money, and she has 2 billion. but she won't lend me any. Isn't she stingy? You think Sue is mad because you dumped her. It's all my fault. If only I met you before Sue. It's not your fault, Jenny. John smiled at her, and then turned to me with a face full of disdain. Sue, we're over. I've only ever loved Jenny. Your clinginess just disgusts me. The guy who used to put me first now spoke so harshly to me. My heart sank. I swayed, struggling to stand. A hand steadied me from behind, and a warm magnetic voice whispered in my ear, Miss Smith, long time no see. I looked up into a pair of cool, calm eyes. Felix, the head of the Green Group and Vivian's brother. He's known for being ruthless and having a sharp tongue in the business world. People usually avoid him. I'd seen him on magazine covers, but this was my first time meeting him in person. He glanced at me to make sure I was okay, then turned to John. John, even a kid knows that helping is kindness, not helping is a duty. Why the moral pressure? Jenny's your girlfriend. If you're worried about her, you pay instead of letting her beg a stranger. His words were cutting, and the crowd was buzzing. Felix actually defended Sue. Sue's family's all scrapped now. How come Felix is helping her? Isn't Green and William's family working together lately? Why's Felix making John look bad for a girl from a poor family? Hey, don't you know, John's just a figurehead. He doesn't have real power in the Williams family. His brother has it all. John's face turned dark, looking daggers at me. Felix raised an eyebrow. John had no choice but to hand Jenny a check with gritted teeth. Jenny, take this and repay Miss Vivian. Jenny's face was pale with humiliation. She squeezed in between Felix and me, smiling. Felix, Sue and I aren't strangers. Let me introduce you. She's my sister. Just found her birth parents today. Thank you, but no need. Felix politely cut her off, distant. Was it not necessary to introduce me to him? I mean, a guy like him at the top doesn't need to acknowledge everyone, but it still stung a bit, especially since he just helped me out. Jenny looked thrilled to see me uncomfortable, barely hiding her joy. Like she was saying, see, I knew someone like you isn't worth knowing. Felix, however, smiled. I know Miss Sue. We went to college together. I'd heard a lot about her. He said it, looking me straight in the eye, his cold face softening. You're impressive. His eyes had an elegant shape, especially charming when he smiled slightly. My heart skipped a beat. The previous hint of upset vanished instantly. Thanks, Jenny, having been rebuffed again, stomped away in a huff, with John following after her. With Felix having helped me out, we naturally fell into conversation. We chatted a lot. He always matched whatever I said, and seamlessly led the talk further. It was never awkward. Around 8:30, the party was only halfway through. I gently tapped Felix's shoulder to say goodbye. Felix stood up too. I'll walk you out. No, thanks, Mr. Felix, I laughed. I'm just going to pick up my sisters from class. Jenny, sitting behind us, scoffed. Just the two of them? Getting into community college would be a stretch. Always dreaming about Harvard. Oh, right, I forgot. You dropped out of high school, and couldn't even make it to community college either. I shot her a glance, not caring about how gloomy she looked, and just walked away. I waited outside the school for a bit. When the bell rang for night classes to end, students filed out. My two younger sisters saw me, but were too shy to come over. Who wants to sit in the front seat? I opened the car door and waved them over. Big sis, just got a new car. Let's go home. Me. Zoe shot her hand up and ran over. I leaned in to buckle her seatbelt, and then opened the back door for Jane. On the way back, I noticed both sisters were sneaking glances at me. Curious, I looked over, and they quickly turned away. I just chuckled. Sis, Zoe said softly, you're really pretty, like a big star. That made me smile big. Well, when I become a big star, you'll be the first I autograph for, I promised. I want one too. Jane chimed in from the back. Of course, one for you too, Jane. Zoe tilted her head, blinking before carefully leaning over. Sis, I got a notice from school today. I've been accepted early to Harvard. What? I couldn't believe it and slammed on the brakes. Zoe suddenly pulled back, looking scared. Sis, please don't be mad. I didn't mean to brag. She's just a kid, yet she looked so frightened. It broke my heart. It's hard to imagine what she went through in the past. Our parents seemed decent. They wouldn't treat the kids poorly. I gently patted her head. Zoe, don't worry. I'm not mad. I'm just surprised. My little sister is amazing. I'm so happy for you. Really not mad? Zoe asked hesitantly. But Jenny got mad. When I told her I was top of the class, she hit me and told me not to tell Mom and Dad. As Zoe spoke, her oversized school uniform sleeve slipped down, revealing bruises all over her arm. A wave of pain hit me. I knew Jenny was jealous, but I didn't think she was cruel enough to harm the kids out of spite. Sis, I'm fine. I forced a smile. Being good at school isn't wrong. You don't have to hide it. Let's go buy some cake and celebrate your acceptance. Okay, I want cake too, Jane added, clutching the seat with wide, cautious eyes. Sis, I got into Oxford. I couldn't stop grinning. My sisters were both exceptional. Alright, let's get 2 cakes and celebrate together. When we got home, Mom and Dad were still up. Seeing the cakes and hearing about the Harvard and Oxford news, they were stunned, then overjoyed. After the cake and washing up, our house didn't have separate bathrooms. Dad heated 3 pots of water for us to bathe. While brushing my teeth, I heard them sighing in their room, discussing how to cover the tuition. They decided to get student loans. Before bed, Mom brought warm milk to my bedside. Looking at the steaming milk, I quietly said, I'll cover Zoe and Jane's tuition. I told her, I already bought a place downtown, ready to move in. It's the weekend tomorrow, let's move. The second month after moving to the new place, I got invited to a variety show. Jenny was invited too. I found out John and the Smith family spent a fortune trying to launch Jenny's career with this show. Kinda ironic. It seems they called me a disgrace when I wanted to get into showbiz. Now for Jenny, they're all in. At the first show, we had to introduce ourselves and then team up. After my intro, Jenny suddenly went, Sue, I heard your sisters didn't take the college entrance exams. Her words made the room freeze. Several guests gasped. Just as the host tried to jump in, I sat up and smiled politely. Yeah, they didn't take the exams. That's a shame. Jenny sighed with false pity, but I caught the glee flicker on her face. Community college isn't bad or anything. Nope. I cut her off with a smile. Jenny only seemed more pleased, offering, it's okay even if they can't get into college. I can pull some strings for them. Thanks, but no need, I replied cheerfully. Zoe got into Harvard, and Jane's going to Oxford. Some folks just don't see beyond community college. Other guests congratulated me, leaving Jenny's face turning red and blue as she clenched her jaw. Looks like the producers paired her with the hottest actor, and me with a gaming streamer. The show's sponsor was a card game, and our first task was to draw cards from the game. Fewer gold cards meant elimination. Everyone was new, and only got a 10-card draw initially. The rest had to be earned. To save time, Jenny went all out with money. She splurged $4,000 for extra draws, giving both her and the actor $140 each. 280 total draws, 4 round guarantees, just got them 4 gold cards. Others marveled at the luxury of having deep pockets. Jenny, with a modest smile, partially covered her mouth while saying, oh well, I'm just having a bit of bad luck. So I have to spend money to win. But with Sue's family situation now, I guess you can't really afford to spend, right? So you'll have to slowly save up resources. Everyone exchanged glances and subtly shifted, worried I might ask to borrow money. My teammate whispered, Sue, should we also spend some money? Don't worry, I can cover it. No need. I shook my head, leaving my teammate looking a bit disappointed. Following Jenny's lead, the other guests decided to spend money too, but most of them only got the minimal guarantee of 1 good card. We were the last group left to draw cards. Jenny glanced over at us. Oh, Sue, you only have 10 draws. You definitely won't get a good card, and you might get eliminated. My teammate looked defeated and handed me his phone. If we get eliminated, then so be it. I calmly clicked the confirmation button for the draw. The card animation just wouldn't stop. Seeing my expressionless face, Jenny arrogantly moved closer. Sue, don't feel bad if you don't get anything. It just means you're broke and unlucky. Excuse me, have you ever heard of 6 golden cards? What? Jenny was puzzled, clearly not getting what I meant. I waved my phone screen in front of her. 6 gold cards from 1 10-card draw. Jenny was stunned. She jumped up in shock. No way. My teammate quickly sat up, pushing Jenny aside, and excitedly admired the phone while shaking his head. Sue, you're so lucky. Suddenly, realizing something, my teammate spent money for another 10 draws and handed me his phone. I hit confirm. The animation lasted about a minute. My teammate was on his knees, again 6 gold cards. Sue, is the sponsor secretly in love with you or what? That's amazing. Sue, I'll depend on you for all my card draws from now on. My teammate was ecstatic. The other guests were envious, and they all came over, handing me their phones to draw cards for them. In the end, the sponsor's staff discreetly pulled me backstage, gave me a check, and asked me to stay away from the game. After the show aired, I got a lot of buzz as the chosen lucky star. Jenny, on the other hand, with her connections, faced a major backlash as people mocked her every move. People online criticized her for causing her own problems and getting humiliated. Jenny's face was dark for days, and every time she saw me, She looked like she wanted to kill me. A couple of days later, the director suddenly called to say I didn't need to come for the second episode. Then, the company sent me a contract termination notice. When I called my manager, he mumbled something, but wouldn't say why, only asking me to come to the office to sign the contract termination the next day. I locked myself in my room and sulked all day. My parents didn't dare disturb me, only letting my sisters bring in my favorite chocolate lava cake and coffee. Zoe held my hand, saying, "Sis, don't worry. Jane and I will study hard and become directors one day, just to make movies for you." I smiled and ruffled her hair, feeling a bit better. The next morning, I arrived at the company early. I sat in the meeting room, thinking about the upcoming discussion. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Jenny and John coming in arm through the blinds. My manager was fawning over them, saying, "John, Sue's contract termination is ready, and the signing contract for Miss Smith is ready too. Once Sue's terminated, we'll follow your instruction to freeze her opportunities, and all her resources will go to Miss Smith. Are you ready to sign now?" Jenny joyfully kissed John's cheek. "John, you're so good for spending so much money for me. But do you think Sue would be mad if she found out I asked you to pull out as the investor for her first movie?" John gently reassured her. "Jenny, she's a nobody. Who cares if she's mad? I only care about you." I couldn't help but tightened my grip on my phone. Jenny despised me. If she was behind John's actions, it didn't really surprise me, but I didn't expect them to hook up before John and I broke up. I calmly walked over in my heels, smack. 2 slaps, one to John, one to Jenny. I put all my strength into it. Jenny was stunned and screamed, "Sue, you dare hit me." John looked furious and raised his hand to hit back. I met his gaze evenly. "I've recorded your entire conversation. You can hit me back if you want, but I can't promise I won't upload it online." "John, maybe you don't care since you're not a public figure, but what do you think will happen to Jenny? A cheater and a mistress. You two are honestly a perfect match." Jenny, terrified, held onto John's raised arm. "John, don't." John hesitated before reluctantly lowering his hand. His eyes flicked to my termination contract with disdain. "Sue, look at you now since leaving me. I'll tell you what, apologize to Jenny, and I might help you find a tiny company." "Excuse me, John." The boss burst in and interrupted him. He bowed and apologized repeatedly to John. John's smug look grew even more obvious. "Sign the contract to terminate her and get her out of here." Jenny, nestled in John's arms, also glared at me smugly. Sorry, John," the boss said, looking a bit startled, and awkwardly wiped the sweat off his forehead. "What I meant was, we can't end the contract with Miss Sue anymore." Both John and Jenny were taken aback. The boss awkwardly smiled, trying to explain. "I just got a call from the director. Sue's first movie is out overseas, and it's a huge hit, breaking $6 billion at the box office. And Sue's been nominated for an Oscar. So, I'm really sorry, but we won't be terminating Sue's contract." He kept bowing and apologizing to me. "Miss Sue, to make up for this, I can upgrade our agreement with you. You'll get an extra 10%. Jenny's face reddened with anger, tears almost welling up. She pinched John's arm, pouting, "John." John irritably patted her hand to calm her, then asked with a frosty tone, "Are you planning to give up William's investment for Sue? Just a heads up, if you piss off William and Smith, you'll lose a lot of business partners." The boss hesitated, looking troubled for a moment. I smirked. "When it comes to investments, if William can pull out, I can step in. I can invest $50 million into the company. Would that help with the cash flow issue?" "Oh, that's fantastic, Miss Sue." The boss was overjoyed, prioritizing me over appeasing John and Jenny. "I'll call a stockholder meeting right away, and we'll sign the contract later." "Sorry, Miss Jenny." "John, excuse me." Jenny and John were left furious, their faces dark as coal. I gave them a triumphant look and walked away, without a backward glance. After signing the new contract, I became a shareholder in the company. After a brief chat with Tom, I left. In the parking lot, I bumped into Felix. I politely greeted him. "Fancy seeing you here, Mr. Felix." "Not really." Felix chuckled quietly, a bit awkwardly touching his nose. "I was waiting for you, Miss Sue." I wasn't sure if I was imagining it, but this man, known for being mature and decisive, had reddened ears. He seemed a bit like a love-struck teenager. I raised an eyebrow, signaling him to continue. Felix bent down, opened the car door, and took out a bouquet of flowers. "Miss Sue, congrats on your movie success. If you don't mind, can I invite you to dinner?" "I'd be honored." During dinner, Felix was clumsily trying to impress me, yet it was subtle, respectful, and not overwhelming. Before paying the bill, he smiled at me, saying, "Miss Sue, I know you've been facing some troubles recently. If you need help, you can always reach out to me. You know, I'd never say no to anything you ask." He was smart, offering help with humility, preserving my dignity. "Thank you, Mr. Felix." I appreciated his gesture, but politely declined his offer of help. After John's sudden betrayal, I understood that relying on a man's help might offer temporary relief, but it's not sustainable. I'm not someone who's content with just temporary success, but I did like Felix. Since I liked him, I wanted to keep a little room for us to potentially connect. I've never hidden my feelings. So, when he dropped me home, I invited him to my premiere. Felix looked surprised for a moment before smiling warmly. "I'll be there on time, Ms. Sue." I smiled and closed the car door. "You can just call me Sue." At the premiere, Felix dressed smartly and sat on my right. I brought the jacket he had lent me before and handed it back. "I've washed it. Thanks for helping me out last time." "It was my pleasure." This was my first time watching my own movie. Felix watched attentively. Throughout the movie, I felt a light touch on my fingertips resting on the armrest. Looking down, I saw Felix's hand also placed there. His fingers carefully brushed against mine, then withdrew quickly, his fist clenching and unclenching nervously. In the glow from the big screen, I saw his side profile slightly red. I placed my hand on top of his. Felix hesitated, glanced at me, and then firmly held my hand. When the premiere ended, it was met with thunderous applause. I put on a cap and sunglasses, discreetly pulling Felix out the front door to avoid being caught by the crowd. Felix let me lead him, but at the cinema entrance, I noticed Jenny standing alone, looking around. I wasn't sure who she was waiting for. Felix stepped in front of me, blocking my view, with a hint of jealousy in his voice. "Don't bother looking at her." I couldn't help but laugh. "All right, I won't." My first film was also a huge success domestically, and I became popular again, even winning an Oscar. To celebrate, my parents rented a ferry. During dinner, they handed me a file mysteriously. It was a stock transfer document from a listed company, with my mom as the transferor and me as the transferee. I was a bit puzzled. My dad clumsily tried to explain, "When we moved, you gave us some money to start a business. We didn't know what to do at first, so we tried stock trading. It went well, and then Zoe and Jane suggested starting a company. So we did. Now it's gone public. We figured you're busy and probably have expenses, so we decided to transfer the stocks to you. If you don't want to get married in the future, having this money is a good backup." My eyes welled up, and tears started streaming down. When I lived with the Smiths, they never liked me. They kept urging me to return after I went abroad for school using my part-time job money. Not because they missed me, but because they wanted me to come back and marry John for their own benefit. All these years, I never felt any family warmth from them. At night, I couldn't sleep, tossing and turning, so I tiptoed downstairs to take a walk outside. There was no moon tonight, and the lights in the neighborhood were dim. Mosquitoes buzzed everywhere. After getting bitten a few times, I decided to head back. Suddenly, a shadow darted in front of me. "Sue, I hate you. Why don't you just die?" I dodged quickly. The figure missed me and fell to the ground. In the dim streetlight, I recognized Jenny. Her hair was a mess, and she had dark circles under her eyes. She was holding a fruit knife, and when she saw me, she charged like a madwoman. The hatred in her eyes was as if she wanted to tear me apart. I ran as fast as I could, losing one of my slippers in the panic. Thankfully, I wasn't far from home. I slammed the door shut behind me. Jenny couldn't get in and just screamed her head off outside. I could hear her stabbing the door with the knife. My family woke up from the noise, checked on me anxiously to make sure I wasn't hurt. Zoe called the police, and soon Jenny was taken away. I was still shaken, hugging a pillow as I sat against the wall. Zoe later told me that someone had seen Jenny slashing a poster with my face on my movie premiere day and writing nasty things on it. The video went viral, and Jenny got attacked online for a whole week. The Smiths and John spent a fortune on her, but she threw it all away. And somehow, Jane said, puzzled, the Smiths suddenly went bankrupt. Smith's older brother got into a car accident and didn't make it. Now they're calling Jenny bad luck, and she's been camped outside our house for days. After Jenny was taken away by the police, Mrs. Smith showed up too. I hadn't seen her in months. She looked old and worn out. Zoe offered her some warm water, and she sat with the cup, hesitant to speak. I asked Zoe and Jane to leave the room and handed Mrs. Smith a bank card. "There's 500,000 here. The password is 6/8. My tone was flat. "Consider it a repayment for raising me, Sue." Mrs. Smith clutched the card, breaking down and sobbing into her knees. I should never have brought her home. Ever since then, we've had nothing but trouble. "Sue, if you have time, come visit home. Your brother is gone, and your dad really misses you." I didn't care for her complaints. "You can leave now," I told her. "Take care." Then, I had the maid escort her out. Felix planned to meet up for dinner today. I got ready, put on makeup, and headed out. The roads were clear since it was a weekday. While waiting at a red light, I glanced in the rearview mirror. A red BMW was coming up fast behind me, showing no signs of slowing down. My instincts kicked in. With 30 seconds to go on the light, the car kept coming. I quickly hit the gas, turning right onto a different lane. After checking the rearview again, I saw the BMW continue straight, then try to turn to follow me. Just as the light changed to green, it collided head-on with a Ferrari, a loud crash filling the air. In the sparks, I saw someone struggling out of the Ferrari. It was John, but he soon collapsed. The whole thing happened so fast. Traffic cops, firefighters, and medics swarmed the scene. I parked and cooperated with the police. Although I switched lanes to avoid the wreck, I still got a few points taken off. I was still shaky from the wreck when they dragged Jenny out of the BMW. My blood boiled. It was Jenny, again. She wanted to kill me. When the police finished, Felix arrived and held me tight. "It's okay, Sue. It's okay now." I clung to his shirt, still in shock, unsure of what to think. John got carried away on a stretcher, off to the hospital. Jenny was handcuffed and taken by the cops. As she passed me, she shot me a murderous look, like a snake from hell, ready to strike. She shrieked at me shamelessly right there. "Sue, why aren't you dead? You should have died. You stole my life. How can someone like you live so well? Sue, you should be dead. Don't listen, Sue." Felix rested his chin on top of my head, his large hand covering my ears to drown out Jenny's nasty curses. "Don't listen, Sue." John didn't make it. He was pronounced dead after they tried to save him. The police checked the footage from the day of the accident. Sue intentionally rear-ended the car, leading to murder charges since someone died. But the Smith family was quick to pay compensation and showed remorse, so she got sentenced to 18 years. In court, I was sitting in the witness stand, looking straight ahead with a calm face. Mr. Smith couldn't handle the blow this time and died of a sudden heart attack. Now the only one left in the Smith family is Mrs. Smith. She broke down and cried in court, but in the end, she could only watch as Jenny was taken away. When the trial ended, I stood up to leave. "Sue," Mrs. Smith suddenly called out to me. I turned back and looked at her coldly. Leaning on Sophia for support, Mrs. Smith walked towards me, tears in her eyes as she pleaded, "Sue, come back and visit sometimes, okay?" That brought me back to those days, like when I came first in class and ran home excitedly to tell her, only to get yelled at. Told I was good for nothing else but studying. And when she kicked me out of the Smith house so harshly, "I don't want to," I replied coldly, turning around to leave. Felix and my two sisters were waiting outside. After hugging each of my sisters quickly, I jumped into his arms. The sun was shining brightly. I was ready to live my own life. The end.